Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore positive. We're going to get the Maryland Crab Cake Tour back out on the road, I promise. We got snowed in this week up at Lib's Grill in Bel Air. We're rescheduling for February. I had the wisecrack with Nick up there. I said, let's just do it after the Ravens parade, which will be on February 11th. So we will see. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. I have some Raven scratch offs. I do not have any Raven scratch offs to give away. I'm going to have the Magic 8 balls to give away once we get unsnowed, unthawed. There's a football game on Saturday night. It's a big one. We have discussed the bullpen of the Orioles, the starting rotate. We've discussed everything, but the notion of the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Steelers coming to Baltimore for a playoff game. My dad took me. I was sitting in section 41 behind home plate Memorial Stadium back in December 1976 when the Donald Kroner went into the upper deck. It's been almost 50 years. Crazy. We played a lot of games up there, but we're going to drag them down here. Will Graves is our guest. He is with the Associated Press, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He covers all Pittsburgh sports very, very capably. He is one of my favorite guests to have on. Not so favorite that I want to see the Orioles play the Pirates in the World Series, so we have to spend more time together. You and I used to do some Penguins cap stuff, but I wore the State Fair swag out of Catonsville with the Maryland flag, which you are no stranger. You were born under this flag, Will Graves.
I was, Waldorf, Maryland, born and proud and all that stuff. Although because of where Waldorf is, outside of the Orioles, I always sort of identified with the football team that plays in the nation's capital. Which, look, the last time they won 12 games, I was 17 years old, and as my daughter says to me, "Dad, you look 50, and I'm sure you feel 50 sometimes." An enjoyable thing, especially for my mom this season. My mom has stuck with them. I'm conscientious, right? Like if they're worth my time, I was into them. And then for most of Snyder's era, I was just like, if they were good, I was interested, but I just, I got other things to do. Happy for my mom, all the people that have stuck with them. It looks like they're in the right direction. A Ravens Commanders Super Bowl, which is not going to happen. The Commanders are at least a year or two away. But my God, like you know what? The interesting part would be all the people I grew up with in high school, Nestor, that when that stayed in the area, stayed in the DMV, when the Commanders got bad, they switched to the Ravens, and they're Ravens fans now. And they
See, I
have
could
not come
never
back.
have envisioned that happening. I mean, I had a friend. I still have a friend. I love him more than I love most humans, who was on that side of the fence. Wasn't even from DC. He was from Harrisburg, probably Philly area. He has a little bit of Philly accent to this day. And he's pushing up on 70. And but has loved that team and wore the headdress with Gibbs, the whole deal, all
Right.
of it. Doug Williams, Riggins, all of it. Dude, I'm from East Baltimore. I had 5 minutes with the Fun Bunch when I was in high school. And we lost the team because it was kind of like okay, and they were playing the Raiders, and Jack Squirick happened and all that. I
Yeah.
don't need to remind you. I never remind Theismann about that. But I would just say, this is when the team came here. I was on the radio 5 years already at that point. That's how long I've been here, whether Chad Steele credentials me on Saturday night or not. I've been doing this a long time. I was here before it happened. The notion that the Purple Barneys would ever match what Jack Kent Cook and the waiting list and the president's there,
Right.
like all of that.
Well,
It's amazing the Orioles and the Washington football team, how stripped down those incredible brands of our youth were, right?
I mean, 25 years of incompetent leadership will do that, right? I mean, like that's just sort of I mean, uh, yeah, I mean, and it's crazy how quickly karma seems to be intent on righting itself with the Commanders. I mean, we're talking like I would have settled like at the beginning of the season, I would have settled for 7-10, right? Like that would have been fine. But it seems like it's almost like the end of The Godfather, where where they kill every remote green, everybody gets killed, and it's like they settled all family business. I mean, to beat the Cowboys with their backup quarterback and on the Cowboys, on the road in the last second. And how many games have they won this year in the last minute? I mean, from the Hail Mary to the Falcons to the Cowboys last week, they should. I mean, to what should have happened when they played the Cowboys the first time, if the friggin' kicker makes the extra point to get to overtime, probably. Very exciting times. But the Ravens have earned, like, the people that have stayed with the Ravens, like they have, like one of my good friends from high school is a Ravens season ticket holder. And he's like,
Well, there's
dude,
been a
I'm
hell
never,
of a lot
I'm
more magic over the last 25
correct. And
years,
I mean,
right? I
and
mean,
like, and there's 25 years of competent leadership, right? With what you have with the Ravens. And that's sort of what the Steelers have, and what, like, and the difference here is, and it's interesting, like Mike T signed an extension before last year, before this season. And, there are people still out, like if they haven't won a playoff game since 16, longest drought since the Immaculate Reception. Even in Noel's later years, they had a year or two where they would win a game or two in the playoffs. The pressure's on here for Mike T. And they sort of look like they are who we thought they were this last month. I think last time I was on with you before the last trip down to Baltimore, and I
feels
said
like
the top
5 minutes ago because it kind of
right,
was. And that's why,
right,
like, what's happened to the Steelers and what's happened to the Ravens from that moment. Dude, when they lost to the Eagles here, didn't smell good, right? You know what I mean? Like, nothing was
right.
going right. Kicker was bad. Middle of the defense was bad. Like, and by the time we stumbled into that Pittsburgh game, it was sort of like, well, you still had some confidence in Russell Wilson in the offense. I tell you what, man, and I've watched it all. It's amazing the juxtaposition of 1 month for both of these franchises and their trajectory
Yeah,
leading to
I
this
mean,
path, right? Literally.
yeah, I mean, and Mike T has owned that. I mean, he said, look, that this is the going to Baltimore is the tax we pay for not winning the division. It's hard to find, optimism outside of that room, and maybe even in that room. To your point, you talked about Russell Wilson. The offense has regressed the last 3 or 4 weeks, and a lot of that's on Arthur Smith. I mean, on it was weird that Russell Wilson threw for 414 yards and 3 touchdowns the first time they played the Bengals. And the decision this time was, let's take the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands and let's try to run the ball as much as we can to try to maintain the possession, control the clock, whatever. They ran on 11 of their 12 first downs. They ran the ball every time. Arthur Smith, it seems intent. If you guys, I'm sure you guys have watched any Steeler games this year, they call 2 or 3 toss plays a game that go nowhere. And I think the players are getting frustrated. We were in the locker room earlier this week, and I'm not going to identify the player, comes in. He was the only player in the locker room, and it's a defensive player and not a starter. So but I'll leave it there. We were like, hey, man, do you want to talk? It's so crowded in here. And he laughed. He goes, why? You guys want to ask me about that toss play? I mean, like the players themselves are getting sort of tired with what this it's weird that they've absolutely just gone away from what was working. It's bizarre. And you throw in the fact that George Pickens seems to be pouting his way out of
Well, yeah,
town.
what is that? That to me is the issue, right? Like that they've taken on, dude, you've covered Antonio Brown. You've covered a lot of that, right?
No,
And I just in a general sense that, I mean, the kid we had here for 5 minutes who said
Deontay.
I don't want to
Yeah,
play.
Deontay Johnson,
We were
right.
talking. We did a whole soliloquy on you thinking he was a decent guy. Like we did that last month. But there's been a thing there with Pickens. Like I don't. We have Mike Wallace here for a minute. There have been so many receivers that have gone through the system there that have moved on the other. Not Hines Ward, who should be in the Hall of Fame, by the way. I'll make that case. But the Pickens thing to me, he's their difference maker, right? Like he's their most
Yeah,
special player, right?
correct. Yeah, but and I just, we're in year 3 with him, and I don't see a lot of movement in terms of maturity. Mike T is never going to publicly like closest he got to calling George out this year, and the guy's been fined half a dozen times. He seems to want to get in a fight pretty much at the drop of a hat with whoever happens to be within arm's reach of him. And my closest Mike T came, he said earlier this year, he needs to grow up in a hurry. And when you like the drops, he's been so good that I have no problem with the drops against the Bengals, but his comportment is a problem. And I think they're going to reach a point this offseason where they either have to pay him a lot of money because he's entering his the fourth, he was a second round pick, so then next year is his last year of his rookie deal, and they have to decide in the offseason to extend him or try to let him play through that, which I mean, that would be a disaster. Very bizarre. And to be honest with you, any version of their offense that doesn't include him making plays down the field is just absolutely ineffective and is a path to ruin, to be absolutely honest with you. So it sort of feels, I wrote about this kind of after the Chiefs game. that it feels like Groundhog Day here. Let's remember in Groundhog Day, like Bill Murray did all sorts of different things to try to get through the end of the day, including, driving off a cliff with a groundhog on his lap. The Steelers have tried. I mean, they've had five straight one and dones in the playoffs, and or four one and dones in the playoffs, and and they've lost five straight playoff games back to the
But by the
16
way,
AFC
Luke has a
Championship.
word for that. Two words. He calls that a good bad team.
Well, right. I mean, and they've tried different things. I mean, like they blew it up. They blew up their quarterback room. I mean, how bizarre was this in week 17? Simultaneously during week 17, the Steelers played on Christmas. On that Sunday, you had Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, and Mason Rudolph all playing at the same time for different teams.
Oh,
And
whoa, whoa,
all
whoa, whoa. I
that
can top that. We had Joe Flacco, Tyrod Taylor, and Snoop Huntley all playing at the same time in the league. So there, have that. I'll up you a Super Bowl MVP, even though you have one starting on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, it is bizarre, right? So they have tried different things and they find themselves in the same place. And if you look at the AFC playoffs and you rank the quarterbacks, who you get? I mean, where's
Well, that's the
Russell Wilson?
problem, right? Like you're
Like
about to throw
they're in the
Mike
same
T
spot,
out. You clearly have a lot of affinity for Mike Tomlin. You're not a Steelers fan, right?
right?
You've already sold your soul to Joe Gibbs and Joe Theismann here.
Dude, the first game I ever went to was the '83 NFC Championship, 82, where they beat the Cowboys. I mean, like I was 8 years old. Like it was in my blood. Like there was no coming back from that, right? I mean, that's the corest of core memories. But
I
I
found
mean, but
Phil Jackman's press pass from a Redskins 49ers game from like 87 or 88, and Steve Young, maybe is Montana probably that. But nonetheless, like I grew up with all of it here. And before I interrupt, I want to reset. Will Graves is our guest. He's with the Associated Press. He's trying to get a sip in edgewise. He is
we're
up in
bouncing
Pittsburgh.
all over the
Well,
place this
but
year.
here's an interesting thing about this rivalry with you guys in Washington, as I would say it. I did a whole Capitol Center thing right around my birthday at Costas. They put this beautiful coffee table book together. These guys in Laurel who were just dudes who do books and publishing and like they're a memory group, right? They did a coffee table with Abe Poland's heirs and Dick Patrick and all the people that ran the Capitol Center and tickets, just great memories. So we shared that. And that was the point where like not only that, but we had our team taken away from us, right? Like
Right.
our team's playing in a effing blimp out in Indianapolis, right? And we got no team, and they started shipping the Redskin games on the television here in
Right.
1984, right? So the sidewaysness that Nasty Nestor had in the 1990s I mean, dude, I have pictures of us burning Redskins hats in the parking lot in 1998. I have a picture, and I'll pull it up for you because when you look at it, you're going to look at it and you're going to say, that looks like the last scene in The Shining where Jack Nicholson's in the middle. So I'll pull this up for you because it's from the parking lot. So there's been a lot of angst. It would be unthinkable if the Ravens lose to the Steelers at home as a 9.5 point favorite because it snows on Saturday and somehow the Commanders win on Sunday and Monday morning Mike Tomlin's playing football next week, and I mean, like, do you think there's no chance the Steelers can win? Right? Like
I don't
I
want to say
can't
there's
find
no chance, but
anybody that believes in them, even though we might get 5 inches of snow. I mean, anything's possible. But this rivalry's 19, 17, 23, 21, no matter what. And there was a blowout 3 weeks ago, and the Steelers are feeling themselves, and the Ravens are feeling themselves, even though they struggle with the Browns. They played with their food for, 30 minutes
right.
the other day. Like, and they've been the most penalty ridden team in the sport. Like the kicker's been screwy. There's been a
It would
lot of
have to
things
look
here.
like
9.5's a lot to make you laugh. That's all I'm gonna say, Will
I
Graves.
mean, it would have to look a lot like the Ravens trip up here, earlier in the season. The Ravens would have to be complicit in handing the Steelers the game. Tucker would have to miss a couple of kicks. You'd have to throw a pick in the end zone. You'd have to put the ball on the ground a couple times. I mean, and really, that's the reality that, when you look at all the things that have gone wrong for the Steelers and the offense has not been great, but I mean, the defense sort of had been, thriving off turnovers, has not really been generating them. of with the same frequency. Not so the offense isn't getting as many short fields. The defense is, it is in the red zone is not as good as it was earlier in the season. I mean, I think I came on here when we talked before the last, for the last game. I said I expected the Ravens to kind of beat them handily because the Ravens were not going to make the same mistakes. They're not going to only give the ball to Derrick Henry 13 times like they did the first time, right? So I mean, look, TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, Cam Hayward, if those guys can be disruptive, um, and force Lamar into making some mistakes, if Todd Monken's loses control of his senses and doesn't realize I have the best 1-2 punt backfield in football, and I'm just going to rely on that, then yes, the Steelers have a chance. But I just think like a lot would have to happen. I think what we saw, I mean, look, that game a couple weeks ago was sort of close. I mean, they had, they got the pick. Fitzpatrick got the pick. They were down 3. They had the ball, and then the pick six happened, and the game was sort of
It did
over
not
after
feel
that.
like a 17-point game. It did not at
No,
all.
but I would say it did. But I never did. You ever really feel like the Ravens weren't in control of that
You
game?
felt like
I
the
mean,
Ravens, as a Raven follower in person in
yeah.
that game, you felt like they were a mistake away from being a 51
Um,
yard field goal to get them beat. Because I've
well, I mean, very
because
right.
I was here for the Raiders game. I was here for the Browns game. They played with their food for 30. Look, I say this all week, and I would say this on Pittsburgh radio. They're the best team in the tournament. I mean, they have a tested coach, a quarterback that's done it. They have several ways to beat you, Zay Flowers notwithstanding. But like all of that's a mystery when they miss a field goal. All that's a mystery
Right.
when the ball goes on the carpet at the 8 yard line after they've shoved the ball up your ass for 70 yards and make a mistake. And it really gets sideways. And I'll tell you, and this is the prescription, because I've seen them lose more than win this time of year in this format. They don't like cold weather. They built the team to pass, even though, as I pointed out, they didn't really want to pass in years past. Now, Luke would say they threw for 4,100 yards this year, so they wanted to pass. So I agree that every part of this, all the DVOA, and I've had Aaron on, and all of that has improved. But in this particular environment, if they get 6 inches of snow, if Zay Flowers isn't there, if passing the ball against the team
Right.
that their liability is the pass game, and that's not really the way you want to play the game. First down's everything. Because if they're in 1st and 10, no penalties, cool. If they're in 2nd and 2, they're going to beat your ass. If they're in 2nd and 8 or 2nd and 12 or 2nd and 12 or 1st and 25 or some of the awful D&Ds they've been in, that's when the punt game gets involved and they got to come play defense. And but I don't think the Steelers can win the game offensively, which is why I think the point spread's so weird, because I just think there's a notion that there's just no way the Steelers are going to be able to go up and down the field to count to 24 or 27 on their own, to score 3 touchdowns in this game full field with that offense. I don't think that's possible.
Well, I mean, I think the one thing, and you touched on it a little bit. We asked Mike T this week, you know, about the lack of playoff success that they've had, and he said those are my bags to carry, right? And that's not this collectives, and to that part, he's right. I mean, you got a new quarterback. I mean, you got a bunch of rookies on the offensive line. All your receivers outside of Van Jefferson are young, so are your running backs. But the Baltimore, like that collective, as Mike T likes to say, does have bags to carry because, like, if Lamar, if they struggle early in the game, if it's 6-3 late second quarter,
Dude,
right?
and
And
by the way, the crowd will get down on them here. Like
right, and
that
and
wouldn't
like
have
so
happened 30 years ago. Like that
right that
in my era, that just we didn't boo the Ravens here until like Bowler showed up, and then just Barstool Sports. Just we're in a
right.
different environment, but it will not be a home game if it's 7-3 at the end of the first quarter.
Right. I think like the ghosts that the Ravens are trying to eradicate, you know, if it gets tight early, I think, that there's going to be the uh-oh. Like it's almost like it's almost like being a Caps fan up until 2018, right? It's like, uh-oh. We're up 3-1 in a series. Uh-oh, it should have been, we should have closed this out in game 5. It's that sort of thing is going to happen. The Steelers, in that sense, won't have that sort of pressure because nobody expects them to win, including me. I mean, they are like, when I talked about Groundhog Day last year when they got in the playoffs, that late 3-game winning streak with Mason Rudolph at quarterback, they entered the playoffs as the longest shot in the tournament.
Because
This
Mason
year,
Rudolph was their quarterback. You're
Yes, but
supposed to
this year
lose
with
when
Russell
Kenny
Wilson,
Pickett's your quarterback.
this year with Russell Wilson at their quarterback as their quarterback, they enter the playoffs as the longest shot in the 14 team tournament.
He's not
They
good
like
enough right now,
the
right?
problem.
That's the way we
Their
feel about
problem
it.
is they do not have the court. Like that is like the rest of the team is okay, but when you look at Herbert, Mahomes, Allen, uh, uh, Lamar, I mean those four are clearly better than at this moment, Bo Nix and Russell Wilson and CJ Stroud. But with Nix and Stroud, there's the idea that they can get better, right? Like those guys will have a chance to improve as their careers go on. This is the problem the Steelers find themselves in. They're stuck in neutral. They took a 1 year flyer on Russ. It looked like it was going great in November. And now it's like, ugh, man. I mean, and to me, it's baffling to me that Arthur Smith is getting head coaching interviews. And I like Arthur Smith. He's almost too honest to a fault. But when you look at the way they have regressed, I mean, I asked Mike T point blank. He was like, "Well, we were trying to set an agenda against the Bengals, and that's why we ran it so much." I'm like, "But should the agenda shift before you get down 19-7?" And he goes, "Yes, ideally, yes." So I mean, that like the inability for them to adjust in game offensively is like a problem. But the biggest problem is their quarterback is not. I mean, especially in the AFC, like you're just Russ is not. He's not going to rescue them. Like as if they play complementary football, they get turnovers. Defense plays well enough. TJ Watt does TJ Watt things. They are competitive. And look, I'll be honest with you, when they beat the Bengals the first time, 44-38, you thought, oh, now they're capable of winning a shootout, and they have literally gone. It's been straight downhill since then.
Well, they're not multiple. Will Graves is our guest from Associated Press in Pittsburgh. You say adjust. What's adjust mean if it's Russell Wilson and the offensive line's not winning up front and the long ball's not there because I mean, who's healthy and who's not? I mean, there was a point a couple of weeks ago where felt like you sort of limped into that game a little bit from the Steelers' perspective.
Right. I mean, missing Pickens obviously changes that offense, but I mean, in the 2 games since he's been back, he had one catch against the Chiefs for 41 yards early in that game, and then he's been a non-factor otherwise. I mean, just an absolute non-factor. The Freiermuth is their best, as I've said all season. He's finally emerged as their second best receiver. Should have been that way last year too. I mean, like it's weird that he's been their most adult. He's the adult in the room on that offense a lot of times. Um, but Pat's not a guy that's going to go 40 yards down the field. He's not even a Mark Andrews. He's a possession. He's an 8 catch for 85-yard guy, which is good to move the chains. But George Pickens is the only guy that's a difference maker downfield for them. And when you've got him bottled up, and when the line can't protect Russ, and the other thing that sort of is problematic, if you watch Russ lately, there's a lot of like, oh man, where am I going with the ball? Let me see if I can cook and do what he used to do 10 years ago in Seattle and run around for 6 seconds and make a play. And he did that a couple times early on, but those options have vanished in recent weeks, and that is problematic.
I'll play along that the Steelers are going to punt a lot or throw the ball away, and then it's 37-6, right? Like if they throw the ball away twice, like we saw last week with the Browns and these gifts from Bailey Zappi.
And
But this is a Super Bowl tested quarterback. It's an offense that's been here. They've been losing a lot. Nobody believes, like all of that. I will say they'll punt enough to make the offense not be a factor. Now, convince me the Steelers defense can play with Lamar. And the case I would make that this is not a 9.5 point game based on them having one decal on the side of their helmets and Ray Lewis and, Bart Scott and all the history of the games is just the ability to stop first down, the ability to know what they're doing. And I've said this a couple times out loud this week, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. Because I haven't talked to Mike, although we did a Merry Christmas because he was here in Crab Cake Landy at that point. But for me, the notion that their defense, that's the way it's been built, is the entire offseason, all of TJ Watt's career has been about chasing down Lamar Jackson and most recently Joe Burrow. And the way they build everything is that's a quarter of the season. I can almost hear Mike T. That's quarter of the season, dog. We can't go 1-3 against them. We prefer to go 4-0, but we at least got to go 2-2, and we got to deal with both of them, and they're different. And we have to build a team that can stop them. Or now the
right.
Burrow thing. I mean, you're mentioning all the problems, all these other quarterbacks, these lightweights, and I'm thinking, well, there's Now, there's a big boy in the room that's not even in the tournament. He's out fishing and pissed off this week. I'd like to
Yeah.
see how that organization's going to rebound. But in particular for the Steelers, I see them as having three really special players on defense, and that's what gives the Ravens problems. And the thing that doesn't give the Ravens problems are NFC teams that have no idea. They're not built for Lamar. They have to figure out a scout team 3 days before the game. Steelers are been watched. They watch this all year long. I think they're better equipped to come in and play it on Saturday night and play it closer than they're just going to get their ass kicked or they're overwhelmed. I do not think the Steelers defense, if they're healthy, is overwhelmed on a cold night by the Ravens without Zay Flowers, right? Like, if that's the way we're going to play it on Saturday night, I think the Steelers will slobber knock for a while and make this thing salty and ugly because that's the way it usually is.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, look, the last game was sort of, from a spread standpoint, was an aberration, right? I mean, the pick six sort of exacerbated that, but it was still like, I never really was concerned. There was a point in the third quarter where I thought, man, this is one of those games where they don't deserve to win. And to your point, Boz, there's a punt return for 30 yards and a third and 8 that they convert, and Boswell kicks a 51-yarder as time expires and they win by one, right? Like that's sort of the
Still a
recipe
win.
that. Right, that's the recipe that they kind of have to follow. I mean, but TJ has not, if you look at, he's been on a bad ankle for about a month now. It doesn't look the same. Teams have been able to turn their attention to him more effectively than they have in recent years. I don't know if he's not slowed, but he's certainly, but like they have other, I mean, Deshaun Elliott's been great as a compliment to Mika Fitzpatrick. Alex Highsmith is probably one of the more underrated. He's been hurt this year, missed 6 weeks for various injuries. One of the more underrated sort of Robins to Batmans in this league. Preston Smith had a sack last week, and then they got him at the deadline. The defense is capable, but like the
You
defense
mentioned
has
everybody but
to.
Patrick Queen. Hold on, stop. I can't let you
I
do that in Baltimore.
we look, PQ has been good. I mean, he's been good. He's been good. Like, he was a slow start. He's been good. I mean, and the thing is, when you come in with the moniker of, well, that's the biggest free agent contract they've given to any player in team history. I mean, that says two things. One, the Steelers don't spend money in free agency, let's be honest. But also, like, there's an inherent sense of responsibility with that. PQ hasn't run from that. He's been good. And I remember I talked to him before the season started, and one of his motivating factors to leave Baltimore was, one, that they didn't offer him a contract, but two, he wanted to prove that he could be good without Rowe next to him. That's what he wanted. And I think he's done that. I think he's been, the six is noticeable. He's noticeable just about every Sunday. Is he a difference maker? No, but I mean, in terms of, like, is he on the level of Cam and TJ and Minka? No. But I mean, at that position, since Ryan Shazier got hurt in 2017, the inside linebacker had been a mess, an absolute mess. I mean, they missed on Devin Bush, and there were guys like Joe Schobert that kind of came right, just random dudes that kind of popped up. Mike Bostic, just random guys that popped up. So Patrick has been a definite upgrade, and and Atlanta Roberts has also been excellent. So, like, the defense is good enough, and they have until that last game, had success against Lamar. But I just think Lamar is so talented, and you would hope that Todd Monken's smart enough that they would come up with a plan to figure out how to beat these guys. I think it relies heavily on having 22 be 22, especially if Zay Flowers isn't playing. But look, they also have trouble with the tight ends. I mean, they had trouble with the tight ends last time, right? So and to the point where Mike T was very pointed the next day about that. Like, man, we in the red zone, we got to cover these tight ends. We can't cover these tight ends. So, because both of them had touchdowns, I think. So, I just think from a talent standpoint, the Ravens are better. Their quarterback is special. They should win the game. The Steelers, the best thing the Steelers have going for them is if they get the Ravens to be sloppy early, it gets tight, and then everybody in the stands is channeling their Will Graves watching the Caps Penguins in the '95 playoffs, up 2-0, and then up 2-1, and then in game four of that series, the Nedved game where not Adamo, it's the center, Joey Juneau has a penalty shot in overtime after Mario's been ejected, and he doesn't make that, and then Nedved scores at like 3 in the morning, and then the series basically is over. That kind of like, oh, here we go again, is going to creep in if it's tight for the Ravens, because it was this in the playoffs last year in the championship game against the Chiefs. It was the same thing. It was, we're home. This is not the Chiefs team that it's been. We have the horses, and it got tight, and they just couldn't close. So I think that that's the Steelers' best chance. They have to keep it tight, and then they hope that Ravens sort of get in their heads a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna do the whoop 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 because Murphy probably had the
Larry
puck.
Murphy,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I just wanted to make sure he was on the '95 team. I looked that up just to make. I knew he was there a little before that with Lemieux. Will Graves is here. He is an encyclopedia of Maryland, Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, DMV sports knowledge. We'll challenge his skipjacks knowledge on our next reading here. I listen, man. They get together 3 times in any given year. This really is kind of an interesting game and a gift and weird, and through the rivalry and how it turns out, especially to your point, for Mike Tomlin and for John Harbaugh, who both sort of kind of got to win this game, or it makes for, a really, really bad, hideous, really hideous here, but not really any better where you are, right? Like it goes into battle mode beginning midnight Saturday night if the Steelers lose by 3 touchdowns somehow, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, they're probably if the defense plays poorly, I'm sure that Terrell Austin, their defensive coordinator, who is a great
What a
guy,
great guy, right?
and
Terrell Austin.
well respected across the league, but he will probably he'll be a sacrificial lamb, even though that's really Mike T's defense. I mean, that's the reality of it, right? But somebody's got to take the fall, like Keith Butler did before him, like Dick LeBeau, the great Dick LeBeau, did before him. So like that's just kind of what I would expect. Otherwise, like, their offseason is going to include, what do you do at quarterback? Because I mean, Fields is on an expiring contract. Was a 1 year deal. And they're not any closer than they were. And the problem is, like, you've got a potential Hall of Famer in Cam Hayward, a certain Hall of Famer in TJ Watt, and it may be a fringe Hall of Famer in Minka Fitzpatrick. I mean, Cam's 35. He might be an all pro team's coming out this week. He's a Pro Bowler at 35. How much more gas does he have left? TJ's on the back half of his prime. You sort of have wasted, they've wasted the primes of these guys' careers without any playoff success. That is, man, that's tough.
Hey, everything
That's
you
tough.
just said is ditto next weekend if the Ravens do a facer in Buffalo or if they lose to Kansas City. I mean, it's really weirdly Super Bowl or bust here when you have Lamar and Derrick Henry. You don't even talk about Derrick Henry. You did that a couple of weeks ago, but like the Derrick Henry thing is, if they have to get off the bus and play 17 games without him next year, right? I mean, if without that sort of impactful player, and when I'm sitting here talking to old people older than you and me, and I'm like, his only comparable's Jim Brown. I mean, that's where we are, and he hasn't won anything either. I mean, there's a lot of
Right.
want here, and I guess that's why I brought up Patrick Queen too, where like, Russell Wilson's got a pelt. I guess Harbaugh and Tomlin have one. I'm Justin Tucker, right? I'm looking around and
Right.
I'm like, other than that, there's a lot of people here with a lot to prove, and that's going on not one game, that's 6 games everywhere this weekend, right?
Right now, but there's different I mean, like, I think there was more pressure on the Ravens at this point. I think internally in Pittsburgh, there's more pressure on the Steelers because of this drought. Um, which is like, there are only 8 teams that have gone longer active streaks in the league without winning a playoff game, right? So I mean, like that, and we're talking about the Steelers, so that's a little jarring for them. Um, but I think externally there'll be more pressure on Baltimore. I mean, I won't be down for the game. I'll be working. Uh, I think the Pens play Saturday. I'll do that, and I'll get home in time to
God,
watch.
every time I offer you a crab cake, dog. I mean, come on, man.
And well, I mean, the boss has got to pay for me to come down there. I mean, that's part of
All
we
right,
have
well,
the great Noah Trister is there for us, and he's our Baltimore guy, and he's great,
go
and a
watch the lousy
DC native.
Penguins. Go watch the lousy Penguins is
They
what,
are. I mean, they are pretty lousy.
you've had a
But
lot of good hockey to watch up there. A lot of good
right. So,
football too.
but I think if listening to the game, if it's tight, I will be I'm imagining whoever the crew that has that game is going to talk about the pressure on the Ravens to sort of have this, because everybody looks at their roster. I mean, they're what? Aren't they? Are they the? Are It's the Chiefs and then them, right? In terms of odds makers picks in the AFC, right? I think the Chiefs is just mostly out of respect. I mean, I don't think it's about like although they look, to be fair, like when
They
they were here
lost
at
one
Christmas, they
game this
look.
year. I mean, I don't know
They
what.
no, but like, and the worst part is, like, if you're anybody but the Chiefs, like, they're starting to look when they played Pittsburgh on Christmas, and they just dismantled them, and I was like, uh-oh, I thought this team sucked. No,
I know one thing,
it
they'll
does
be
not
well
suck.
rested. whatever they'll be, and maybe not battle tested. That they may wind up taking on the Chargers or taking on and around here we're like beat the Steelers and cheer for the Broncos on Sunday, like trying to get Steal a home game. Will Graves, he has his own home games up there. Every Pirates game, every Panthers game, Steelers, ins and that, everything but the Pittsburgh Pisces. He doesn't have to cover them. They moved out mythically almost a half century ago. There you go. I get a little Dr. J reference in.
Yeah, I
Little
was like,
Stockard
Dr. J
Channing.
tried.
Little
Tried to
Stockard
say.
Channing. Hey, happy New Year to you. I'm sorry I
Yep.
darkened your doorstep with this awful playoff game between epic rivals in this epic key matchup for a wild card. That's a pretty big game. It just feels like I wish there was more meat on the bone from the Steelers side to feel like anybody thought they could win.
I think the Steelers think they can win. So, but check back with me if Russ throws a pick in the first quarter.
All right,
So,
Pirates and the Orioles are around the corner. I'm Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Ravens and Steelers and Baltimore Positive.